Thank you so much, Anton, for joining us today at the Dwellynn show. I really appreciate your time, and I just cannot wait to dive in with you today.
I'm very honored to be here, Ola. Thanks for inviting me.
Awesome. So I think before we actually jump into your story, can you just give us a quick brief of, kind of your real estate journey, what you've gone through and how, what you're kind of up to lately?
Sure. So I'm actually originally from Russia. I was born in Moscow, and I immigrated to the United States in the late 1990s, and went to high school here in America, in San Diego in particular. And after that, I joined the U.S. Navy, and I actually served in Japan most of the time for 7 years. That was by enlistment. So back when I was in the Navy, so this was about 10 years ago, my parents actually passed away, and they had a condo in San Diego where they used to live. So you can say I became an accidental landlord, without actually buying my first property. So I was in Japan, in the military. I didn't know much about real estate at the time. Got this property. I wasn't sure if I should sell it, if I should keep it. Talked to a few folks, and they kind of recommended not pulling the trigger. So I ended up renting it out. So it basically became my first rental property. I still have it to this day. And that gave me the first kind of experience, introduction to real estate, being a landlord and actually owning property remotely, because again, I was in Japan during that time. So I moved back to San Diego from Japan. This was about 2013, and finished my naval service and kind of transitioned to a civilian career. And at that time, I started looking more into real estate. I was interested in the role that I had for it in financial freedom. Obviously, it was a great vehicle to generate cash flow. And that kind of, I'd say, was the real beginning of my journey, even though I had this property for a while. Back when I got out of the Navy in 2013 is when I actually started ramping up my acquisition, and started with buying a duplex in San Diego with my wife. And we did the whole house hacking, living in one of the units and renting out the other. And from there, we fairly quickly built our portfolio. We started investing out of state. We bought 4 turnkey properties within about a year of that in Atlanta and Birmingham. And then more recently, we transitioned to the Kansas City market and actually didn't do the turnkey model, but built our own network locally, started sourcing our own deals, specifically in the multifamily realm. And that kind of takes us to now. We're at 35 rental units that generate about 11,000 in monthly cash flow per month. So I'd say we did pretty well.
I would say that too. I would
Well,
say that
thank
too,
you.
Anton. Yeah, I mean, there is a ton in there, and I just want to try to unpack everything. So you
Right.
immigrated, from Russia to the US, the land of, dreams,
Yes, you
right?
can say that.
Yes, right. You served. Thank you so much for your service.
Absolutely.
And then, you had this really tragic event where your parents passed away, and they gave
Right.
you this property. So let's just kind of rewind back a little bit. When your parents died and you got the property, like you said, you could have sold it, but you didn't. But then you were in Japan. So if I'm a dual listener, maybe somebody in the army,
Right.
watching this or listening to this, and there's somewhere, posted somewhere, but they want to invest in real estate. Do you have any advice for them?
I've definitely met a lot of service members who want to buy property, and I think it makes sense for a lot of them. I've used the VA loan program, and I'm sure you're familiar with it, and other service members are. It's a great way to buy real estate with a very low down payment. So I've actually met several folks who, with the military, you move around quite a lot. You spend a few years in one location, then probably move to a different place. Very Several people have been successful by living in a property while they're stationed in a location, or maybe buying a duplex or triplex with the VA loan and using the housing allowance to pay for most of the mortgage. And then when they move, they basically rent the property out. So they kind of build their rental portfolio as they move around. And I think, by the end of your naval career, if you do decide to retire, you can have not only your military retirement, but a few rental properties that you kind of accumulated throughout the years. So I definitely think between the VA program and kind of a more or less guaranteed, income, which kind of gives you that financial stability to own real estate, I think it could work very well for military service members. I would just encourage them to look at it as something doable. I think quite a few, think, well, it's too difficult, or I move around too much, but I think it's definitely possible.
Absolutely. And there's a lot of things that you did in terms of buying out of state. So we're definitely going to jump into that.
Right.
But before we do that, I'm just trying to connect the dots. So, we have service members, they get deployed, they come back into civilian life, they get a, regular job,
Sure.
did the condo basically made you catch the real estate bug? Was that the one property that made you think, hold on, I don't necessarily just want to come back after my naval career, I actually want to do this? I mean, what was that reason that made you say, I want to do real estate investing full time, as opposed to getting a regular job or whatever?
It definitely gave me a lot to think about. I'll tell you that. Before I had that property, I never even considered real estate. I kind of started my investing with, stocks, bonds, the equity market, and had the IRA, 401k going, things like that. And that was going pretty well for a few years. I honestly didn't even consider real estate. I was more or less forced into it, basically. But over time, as I owned that property, it definitely gave me a firsthand look at what owning real estate and collecting the cash flow can be. Um, and I would say that it definitely piqued my interest. Now, I will tell you that I realized fairly quickly, that I will need a lot of properties to kind of have a significant passive income. I meet some folks that kind of think one or two rental properties will help them retire, which, they definitely can, but the cash flow typically, if you're using financing, and after all the expenses and vacancies, is still just a few $100s a month. I think my average properties cash flow about 250, 350 per month. So that's not by itself a very significant amount. And I kind of realized early on that I will need quite a few rental properties to generate, a decent passive income. And me and my wife actually set an original goal to have 50 rental units. So that was, our target number that we started working towards.
Wow. And you're definitely getting close to that number. Definitely getting
We
close.
got 15 more to go. I think we'll probably end up buying quite a few over our goal, but I think it's important. That goal was really important for us at the beginning and kind of helped drive our journey and give us something to look forward to.
So you mentioned house hacking, right? So
Yep.
can you kind of walk us through that first deal? I mean, not the condo, but like your
Right.
first, how did you find it, and how did you fund it? I'm guessing the VA, but just kind of walk us through.
Yeah. It was honestly not an easy process. We moved back to San Diego with my wife. I got out of the Navy and we started looking. And, San Diego is a very high price market, a lot of competition there. And I immediately wanted to buy a property that would eventually become an investment property. So we were looking for that multifamily, but, I was really analyzing every deal, running the cash flow projections as if this was an investment property, with the goal of, maybe we'll live there for a couple of years, then move out and rent it out. So that was my initial approach. It honestly took us probably 6 to 8 months, if I remember correctly, before we found this duplex. So it was not an easy time. The inventory here was fairly low. There are a lot of investors in San Diego that you're competing with. And at the same time, I was fairly picky with the numbers. I didn't want to buy just any property. I had specific criteria, and I wanted it to cash flow. So it was a little stressful because it was our first deal, and we were going months and months without getting anything. So, you're kind of getting a little disheartened there, and thinking, well, maybe it's never going to happen. But ultimately it did. We found a duplex, and that's a kind of a B minus area where we felt comfortable living. And maybe this wasn't our ideal place for the long term, but it definitely made a great area for rental properties. And that was our goal to begin with. So we got it under contract, and we did buy it with a VA loan, which kind of gave us an option to put 0% almost money down if we wanted to. We actually put down 7% that we kind of saved over the years of our military service. So we did put a little down payment to avoid a PMI basically, and to build up an initial equity and slightly improve our cash flow. Yeah, we moved into one of the units and lived there for a number of years. I ended up doing quite a bit of work myself on the landscaping and the actual unit. We kind of picked the worst out of the two, and did renovations in there. And I'd say I learned a lot buying that first property and owning it, probably more so than I did reading any books or articles. It definitely gave me that firsthand experience going through the escrow process, the closing process, all the documents, how financing worked, and then learning about the actual house, how it's built, how to rehab it.
So you said you did some of the work yourself. Wow,
I
that
did.
seems scary.
Well, I consider myself somewhat handy. So, and I had time on the weekends. I had some free time, and I decided, well, why not? It wasn't anything super major, but definitely did more cosmetic work and brought our unit up to a decent condition. To when we moved out, it was easy to rent.
Fantastic, fantastic. So you and your wife, you got this duplex, you were house hacking, you did some of the work yourself, and then you felt like, I want to go buy out of state, right? How did you
Right.
guys make that decision? And anybody listening to this, if a dual listeners, they might be thinking, well, I want to do that. Maybe I live in California, or I don't know, a really, really high, expensive market, and I want to
Right.
buy out of state, but I'm so scared. How did you guys make that decision, and how do you manage that process?
It was definitely not an easy decision. I'll tell you that. Every investor I've talked to, and I think from my personal experience, it's always easy to buy local property if you can and if it makes sense. You're there, you can visit it, the city, which areas are good, which ones are bad. For us, unfortunately, we live basically close to downtown San Diego. Again, it's a very tough market in terms of cash flow, which what we really were interested in. And the prices were getting higher and higher, and it was just not cost effective for us to not only save the money for the down payment for such high, purchase price to buy anything here, but also get, very little to pretty much non-existent cash flow. So basically was driven out of this market. I looked at quite a few properties, and I mean, it is possible to find deals here, but I just had this feeling that I could make much better deals elsewhere. So once that decision came about, it kind of opened a lot of possibilities, because I knew I wasn't buying here. I wasn't really even buying in California, so I could really buy anywhere I wanted to. It did kind of seem a little scary, like you said. It's a new town, new city, new even state. I may not have even been there, and kind of managing rental property out of state is definitely takes some challenges and some getting used to. So we actually opted for the turnkey model. So I'm sure you're aware of that, and I know you covered it on your podcast. And I think it was a very good stepping stone for us, even though we don't buy turnkeys nowadays. But we did buy our first 4 single-family homes in Atlanta and Birmingham via the turnkey model. And what that did is kind of gave us that factor of safety, or a little less risk, knowing that we're already, doing a high risk activity, as I would call it, investing out of state, and it was all new for us. And by going the turnkey route, it just gave us a little more confidence that, hey, there's less chances for us to mess up. There is kind of more of the work done for us. Basically, we're getting a property that's rehabbed and hopefully as a quality tenant, and basically checked some of the boxes for us that we would have otherwise had to do ourselves. And that really helped build our confidence and obviously our portfolio. And it was a great stepping stone for us. And, people ask me all the time, do I regret it? Do I recommend it? I have absolutely no regrets, going the turnkey route. Obviously, we paid more for them than if I was to source the deals and do the rehab myself. But with that came kind of increased stability. And we still own those turnkeys, and, rents have gone up and prices have gone up in those areas, and they're delivering great returns. So it definitely helped us branch out from our local market and get comfortable owning more property out of state.
That is really, really interesting, because if there's a dual listener listening in on our conversation now, they're thinking, well, so you were in California, then you went to Atlanta, and then you went to, Birmingham, Alabama. Like,
Right.
how did you guys make that decision to select those markets?
There's tend to like there's basically the two ends of the spectrums. One is, your very cyclical coastal markets like California, or maybe the East Coast, where prices are really high, cash flow is typically very low. I had experience with that market here in San Diego. It really didn't fit my criteria very well. At the same time, I didn't want to invest in super discounted, like super cheap and high cash flow markets, like maybe some parts of Ohio. I liked cities, maybe somewhere in between that, for example, like Atlanta or Kansas City, that have a very strong historical and projected population, economic, and um, job statistics. They're doing good. There's increasing population, a strong renter base. There's a diverse job pool in the city. So basically, the city is doing well, which over time I feel will drive the prices up and kind of give stability to the rental market. So that was one of my major criteria. And the second was the lower home prices. So, as opposed to San Diego, where I have to dish out 400, 500,000 just to buy one house, in Atlanta or Birmingham, I bought several properties for less than 100,000. So it was basically a combination of, strong cash flow, lower purchase prices to decrease that barrier of entry for us, but also looking at the city as a whole, and making sure we're buying in markets that have good projections for the future that will likely drive the prices and rent growth.
So before we even get to Deal Check, which is an absolutely amazing tool that I love, I just want to,
Thank you.
yeah, I just want to really touch on, you know, $10,000 in cash flow a month. This is where
Right.
I called the promised land. How does it feel?
It feels pretty good. I'm not gonna lie. It's when we hit that number, and it gave us a lot of validation for what we were doing. Again, I feel like you buy one property, buy two, and you're just getting a few $100s a month, and it may feel a little discouraging seeing how far you still have to go. But what really helped us is, sticking with our process, sticking with our plan, and keeping that end goal in sight. And then before we know it, I think it even happened a lot sooner than me or my wife dreamed of. We got to the 10,000 mark, and that just kind of opens your eyes that, wow, we've been doing things, we've been doing something right. And just kind of gives you not only motivation to keep going, but the validation that what you were doing, basically the daily grind, if you would, really paid off.
Absolutely, absolutely. So you said keep going. So you guys are pretty much in a good spot. You're cash flowing tremendously well.
Right.
What is the end goal for you guys?
Well, originally it was 50 units. That was kind of when we were thinking it would be a good spot cash flow wise to maybe look at early retirement. I think given that we're probably going to get there, within the next couple of years, a lot sooner than we hoped. We're probably going to keep going at least for a couple more years. We're in our early 30s now, so maybe until about 35, and probably be around 75 units there. And I think that will be our new end goal, if you would. And we'll really seriously consider quitting our jobs because we both actually still work full time, and really living off the income of our properties. Because up to this point, and still, we're reinvesting 100% of our cash flow into buying new rental properties.
There's a lot of good stuff in there, a ton of good stuff in there. So you're just basically taking the cash flow, reinvesting it. But before we even
Absolutely.
touch on that, I love what you said. So you guys are still working, your wife and you're still working. How do you balance, the daily job grind with the real estate? Also, how do you guys do that?
It's comes down to time management, I guess. Just really prioritizing your tasks, but also focusing on, I'd say, automation. We own a lot of property, and the vast majority of it are out of state, and we basically rely on local property managers to do all the daily work. So uh, at first, when we started investing, I tended to micromanage our property managers a little bit, as I think a lot of investors do. It's your house, and you kind of really are concerned of how things are getting done. But over time, I realized that, with after we had 10, then 20, then over 30 properties, that's just not going to be possible. So instead, I focused on kind of grooming, if you would, or working with my property managers to basically develop processes that they could follow. Checklists, sets of guidelines, and basically empower them to do the work for me without my daily intervention. And I think that really helped to cut down the time that I spend managing or kind of keeping track of our portfolio myself.
Wow, I love that. I love the word you use, grooming. That is really, really, really interesting. Where you're not basically working in your business, but you're working on your business, developing systems, processes. Even a simple tool as a checklist could go a long way to making sure that stuff actually gets done. So I really like that
Right.
a
Yeah, I
lot.
think I think once you develop a portfolio of a decent size like ours, you have to treat real estate as a business. It's no longer just a passive investment activity. You have to focus on actually managing people and cash flow, because the people are what going to do all the work for you.
Nice. Though I would love to keep going, but we're definitely dwelling into the quick rounds, and then we can talk about deal check. So these are going to be quick questions,
Let's
quick
do it.
answers. All right. So first question: what makes Anton unique? What is that differentiating factor that separates you from the next guy or the next girl?
I'd probably say that I spend over 90% of my time working. I have very little downtime, and some people look at it as a negative, but I really enjoy what I do, and it just really increases my productivity and allows me to do so much more.
Wow, I love that. So great. I love that. Second question: what was the last book that you read, and what was the one thing that you learned from that book?
Actually, it was the 4-Hour Work Week by Tim Ferriss. Read it a month or so ago, and really took home, decreasing the distractions in your life, reducing the amount of time you spend on social media or reading the news or really unimportant things. And instead, start each day and end each day with really focusing on what, the things that provide meaning and have the most impact on your life.
I love it. I love it. I love it. So you and your wife, you've got this 35 units you're managing. You've got property managers. You've got deal check, which I can't wait to talk about. You've got all these other things going. What do you do for fun?
I'm big into fitness. I hit the gym, 4 or 5 times a week. I'd say that's my number one activity that helps me de-escalate stress, kind of unplug, if you would, from my other activities, and obviously keep my body in shape, which I feel keeps my mind in shape. So I'd say, spending time outdoors and in the gym is probably my number one thing I do for fun.
Nice. So dealcheck.io looks amazing. I'm on your website right now. It's pretty impressive. Why did you start this business, and kind of like what's the goal here?
Sure. So Deal Check is basically an online cloud-based property analysis tool. A few years ago, I was crunching the numbers for the rental properties on a spreadsheet, like most investors that I know, and I just thought there had to be a better way. We're in the 21st century. There's an app, kind of a cloud-based tool for everything, and unfortunately, didn't find one that I like for property analysis. So I built Deal Check to help real estate investors analyze rental properties, flips, commercial buildings, do your due diligence, calculate the pro forma, basically in seconds. So it's an online app that you can access at dealcheck.io, or you can also use it on your Android or iOS phone or tablet. Just search for Deal Check on Google Play or Apple Play Store. We have cloud sync, all your data sync seamlessly, so it's great for driving around, doing quick analysis on a property, then coming back later and looking at it on your computer, because I think that analyzing, cash flow projections or profit projections for flips is absolutely crucial. If you do not understand, all the numbers on the property before you buy, I'd say you're setting yourself up for kind of disappointment or even failure down the road. But if you're, conservative and diligent in projecting what your returns would be, you're so much more likely to be successful. We've had so many investors who use Deal Check and found amazing deals because of it. And I'd love for all of you guys to check it out.
Thank you so much. That it looks amazing, and great job on putting that together. It's fascinating. I love it. So if I'm a Dwell listener and I'm like, I like this Anton guy, I want to get to 10,000 a month, or I want to get, I want to own property out of state, or I'm a, service member. How can people, connect with you? Where are you most active, and can people reach out to you?
Bigger Pockets is probably the best place to reach me. I'm sure all of you know about this site, and if you don't, head over to biggerpockets.com. It's probably the best networking and community on the internet. And if you just search Anton Ivanov on the Bigger Pockets website, I'd love to be your colleague on there, and you're always welcome to message me directly. I have dozens of people message me probably every day or week with questions. I'm always happy to help. Alternatively, you can email me directly at anton@dealcheck.io. That's my direct email. So if you prefer that way, feel free to send me a note, and I'd be happy to talk to you.
Anton, it's been an amazing show. Learned a ton, and I definitely can't wait to, bring you back sometime in the future. Thank you so much.
That would be fantastic. Well, thanks for inviting me again.